The episode of this anime begins with Haruto talking to his clone and asking him about a test. The clone informs him that a school staff member suddenly appeared at his door and told him that he must take a proficiency test before the entrance ceremony. However, Haruto refuses and asks his clone why he declined. Haruto questions how he felt trapped in that room in the past few days. His clone then tells him that this might be his chance, as if he brags about his incompetence in the test, he might be expelled before the entrance ceremony. But if he manages to pass, he won't have to worry about it anymore. Haruto is seen standing behind a tree and then running towards the door. Suddenly, a man appears behind him and asks if he is Haruto, the son of the Margrave Zenfis. The man opens the door and informs him that they have been waiting for him. Haruto enters the classroom and is surprised by its size, estimating that it can hold up to 100 people. He imagines that it's spring in this classroom and gains many friends. However, he collapses onto the floor, saying, "What a terrifying reality. I can't handle this." The teacher is concerned and asks if he is okay. Haruto reassures him that he's fine and explains that this open environment drains his energy. He talks to himself and decides that he must do everything to stay in this test. The teacher hands him the test paper, and Haruto realizes that this is the perfect time to answer everything incorrectly and get out of there quickly. He starts reading the questions but doesn't understand any of them. In this situation, he decides to answer with, "I don't know," for most of them and begins with that approach. He finishes 3 questions and then reaches the barrier magic question. He realizes that they might discover his deception if he pretends not to know everything about it, so he decides to answer some of them. He answers the question about barrier magic, stating that it can be created by movement and can also be colored, and mana is not necessary for its maintenance. He doesn't think they will give him points for these incomplete answers. Finally, he reaches the question about ancient magic, and Haruto remembers that he read about it recently and liked a long-named author's works. Then Haruto writes a lot on the paper without realizing it. He hands the paper to the teacher, who asks him to change the room for mana level evaluation. Haruto informs the teacher that his mana level is 2, so there's no need for the evaluation. The teacher apologizes but explains that it's necessary as it's their policy. As Haruto walks with the teacher, he talks to himself about how if they directly verify his mana level, they'll know he's useless. The teacher opens the door and says, "We have brought him, Professor." Haruto enters the room and hears a voice but doesn't see anyone. Then, the voice instructs him to look down, and he finds a short-statured teacher. The teacher examines Haruto from all angles and compliments his dark hair and handsome face. She introduces herself as Tyrrietta Lucianelle and explains that she's researching ancient magic at this school. She then teases Haruto about thinking how such a short girl can be a professor. She gets annoyed with his audacity and advises him not to anger her, as she can get him expelled before the entrance ceremony. Haruto is surprised by her words, and she clarifies that her outburst wasn't born of fear but rather overflowing hope. She talks to herself, admitting that she can't say she hates unconventional men like Haruto, and her chest swells with excitement. She then gets angry at Haruto again and expresses her confidence in checking his magical knowledge. The teacher takes a look at Haruto's answer sheet and informs him that they will proceed with the evaluation. Haruto asks if she's upset about his bad answers, and he places his hand on a crystal, causing a very bright flash before it shatters. When Haruto uses his magic, the crystal in front of him shatters due to the incredible power and intensity of his magic. He mocks the crystal, thinking it's just scrap. He had believed it to be a valuable item, so when it breaks, Professor Tyrrietta becomes very angry. Haruto wishes that she would just give in to her anger and tell him to leave. However, she suddenly becomes astonished by his power. She can't believe what she just witnessed and tells her friend Polkos that Haruto's magical strength is extremely powerful. It shattered the mega crystal, proving that he possesses a vast amount of magic power. Polkos tells her that he heard that the maximum power at level 2, but it's clear that Haruto is much stronger. He's an exception to everything. Even they, as researchers in magic, don't understand whether mega crystals are powerful or not, so they need to investigate this issue before discussing Haruto's strength further. Tyrrietta then looks at the paper in front of her and sees that for every question, Haruto has written that he doesn't know anything. She finds this fascinating and explains that she loves it. Haruto then explains the barrier magic in a fantastic way in his answers, making them perfect for the ancient magic section. She decides to take him under her wing and train him. She won't let other professors have such an interesting person. She asks him to keep this between them, and although Polkos tells her that she did it all on her own, Haruto refuses her offer to learn magic from her and joins her research. Later, Haruto goes to his room with his clone and tells him about his encounter with Professor Tairieta. He mentions that the rest is up to him. His clone says that he doesn't want to hear such talk from someone who has made a good impression from the start at the academy. Maybe they failed this time, but they won't give up. Then, Haruto's clone, along with his sister Charlotte, gives him a weapon and wishes him luck in fulfilling his duties. Haruto reluctantly accepts the weapon as he knows he has no magic, he's just an empty vessel. He even made the original Haruto cast a defensive spell on him. Thus, the real Haruto gave him this weapon to defend himself. In the end, after his clone completes his duties, he rushes back to his room and encounters a man who frightens him. He doesn't want to get involved with them, so he walks alone on the side. President Schneidel calls them over and berates Haruto for walking past without a greeting. The boy apologizes, saying he didn't know it was part of the academy's rules. The president then asks Haruto to explain the rules to his colleague. Haruto, feeling impatient and not wanting to spend more time with them, decides he'll make up any excuse to leave. During their conversation, Haruto suddenly screams in pain, clutching his stomach. The president gets angry at him and threatens him for mocking him with false excuses, saying he will pay the price and that he'll teach him proper behavior. In response, the president uses his magic, and Haruto panics, fearing that he might get killed. The president strikes him in the back with a magical attack, causing Haruto to fall to the ground. Haruto then suddenly stands up again, having used a defensive barrier, but he pretends to be in severe pain. The girl approaches him, saying she wants to apologize for involving him in all of this and can't understand why the president is so angry. Haruto thinks to himself that he knows he's not great at social interactions, but she's worse at understanding what's happening. The president gets angry again, believing Haruto is mocking him and uses his magic once more. Haruto takes out his weapon and fires it at the president before leaving. Haruto and his clone then discuss the situation, and he remarks that things have gotten bad because that little professor is also after him. This time, he advises his clone to go rest. In the morning, the girl comes to him and hands him a letter. After reading it, Haruto realizes that he's been invited to a big duel. He tells her that he refuses, but she explains that this duel follows the noble's principles. Refusing it would bring shame to the Margrave Xenfis, and intentionally losing would lead to an even worse fate than declining the invitation. So, you must give your best effort to win this duel. Then you left and went away. Then the scene shifts to this girl who was identical to you in the academy. She was watching the situation from afar. Then the scene moves to Haruto, who is sitting on his bed and seems very angry because he's about to face the vice president, whom his duplicate met yesterday. He wants to come up with a good plan to lose to the vice president while not getting hurt at the same time. He then used his screen and the surveillance cameras outside the house and found that the girl was standing with the girl who gave him the answer, and they got into a car together. The scene now shifts to the center of the royal capital, specifically to Marquis Haven's house. This girl talks to him, and she wants him to cancel that duel because she blames him for everything that happened last night. Also, you are not in good condition due to the injuries you sustained from his last attack. You are not in a state to participate in the duel. At that point, Haven gets angry and shouts at the top of his voice for you to get lost. Then he takes the hibiscus juice and pours it on the girl who was treating his wounds because she couldn't do anything for him. The scene now shifts to Haruto, who is watching all of this through audio and video, but the vice-chancellor is being extremely violent with the girl. She apologizes profusely for her complete ignorance, but he tells her that her apology is not acceptable. He wants something else from her. He wants her to dance naked in front of him. The girl blushes with embarrassment and strongly refuses. However, he threatens to cut her throat if she doesn't comply. At that moment, the girl begins to reluctantly obey, but in the final moments, Haruto appears in disguise as a superhero. He scolds her and tells her that she is incredibly naive. He says he'll take her back to the dormitory, so she should put on some clothes and return home. Then he leaves. The young prince is astonished by what is happening and asks the soldiers to turn on the lights immediately, but no one responds. Haruto then tells him that they are in a remote location, so no one will come to help him. The young prince is frightened and asks him who he is and how he did all of this. Haruto replies, "I am Shiva, the enforcer of justice, and I am here to punish you for your sins." The young prince mocks Haruto and uses his magic power to try to defeat him, but Haruto immediately counters with his own magic, causing the prince to fall in extreme pain. The prince notices something on his shoulder, and Haruto informs him that he has placed a binding spell on him for the 3 sins he committed. First, the sin of engaging in a fight with a new student and causing a commotion. The prince interjects, stating that he is the president loyal to the Haven family, and it's allowed for senior students to guide new ones. Haruto tells him that it was an arbitrary decision on his part. He then mentions the second sin, the duel, and calls him despicable for trying to publicly punish a new student without warning. The prince is shocked because it's a completely respectable way to protect noble honor. Haruto insists it's still wrong. Finally, Haruto tells the prince not to harass girls and questions if he feels no shame in loudly commanding a girl to dance naked. He explains that for these reasons, the prince will live with this binding for some time, and if he tries to use magic or remove it, it will tighten. He warns the prince to be cautious. Haruto then leaves, but suddenly returns to the room, visibly in pain. The bystanders are astonished by his actions and what has happened to him. A guard requests immediate medical attention for his wounds. The girl then casts a healing spell on him, causing him great pain because any magic used on the item Haruto placed on him has a negative effect. The onlookers are baffled by these actions and believe he is playing around. The prince becomes extremely angry, declaring that Shiva will not get away with this. And with that, our episode ends. Stay tuned for the next episode with very exciting events. We kindly ask you to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell.